He went for a job interview and found the love he lost years ago. Hello, let's hear another incredible story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. I love narrating stories for you, so get ready. Let's start. The elevator's brass numbers glowed like accusatory eyes. 23, 24, 25. Jasper Hayes adjusted his tie for the 5th time, the silk feeling like a noose around his neck. His reflection in the polished metal doors showed a man trying desperately to look like he had his life together. Pressed charcoal suit, freshly trimmed beard, and eyes that still held shadows from sleepless nights spent questioning every decision that had led him here. Cromwell and Associates, 26th floor. The business card felt worn between his fingers, edges soft from nervous handling. After 18 months of architectural purgatory, designing strip malls and parking garages, while his divorce lawyers bled him dry, this interview was his lifeline back to meaningful work, back to buildings that mattered. The elevator shuddered to a stop, and Jasper stepped into a hallway that smelled of fresh paint and possibility. Conference rooms lined both sides, their glass walls revealing glimpses of Atlanta's skyline. He checked his watch. 2:28 p.m. Perfect timing for a 2:30 interview. Conference room C. He spotted it halfway down the hall and pushed through the door with practiced confidence, already extending his hand toward the figure silhouetted against the window. Mr. Hayes, I presume. I made the coffee cup in his other hand, his third of the day, because caffeine was the only thing keeping him upright, caught the edge of the conference table. Physics took over with cruel precision. Dark liquid arced through the air in slow motion, defying his desperate grab, and splashed across the pristine white blouse of the woman turning to greet him. Jesus Christ! The words exploded from her lips as she jumped back, arms outstretched, coffee dripping from her sleeves onto the polished floor. I'm so sorry. I'm such an idiot. Jasper lunged forward with his pocket square, then froze mid-apology as she lifted her head. Time didn't just stop. It shattered. Dark brown eyes, wide with shock and something that might have been recognition. High cheekbones that belonged in a museum, and lips that had once whispered his name in the darkness of dorm rooms. The same elegant neck, now adorned with a delicate gold chain, instead of the hemp necklace she'd worn in college. Her hair, once wild and natural, was now styled in a sophisticated crown of coils that framed her face like a work of art. Naomi. Her name fell from his lips like a prayer he'd forgotten he knew. She stared at him, coffee still dripping from her fingertips, and for a heartbeat, maybe two, he saw the girl who used to steal his hoodies and read Toni Morrison aloud while he sketched her profile. Then her expression hardened into something carved from granite. Naomi Ellison, she corrected, her voice carrying 15 years of winter. And you're in the wrong room. The words hit him like a physical blow. Wrong room, of course, because that's what his life had become. A series of wrong turns and misplaced hopes. I'm here for the Cromwell interview, he managed, his mouth suddenly dry as sawdust. Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or the ghost of old pain. She grabbed a stack of napkins from the conference table and began dabbing at her blouse with sharp, efficient movements. Conference room D, she said without looking at him. This is room C. The Sustainable Housing Initiative a meeting. You work here. I run the SHY program. Each word was clipped. Professional. And unless you're here to discuss affordable housing solutions, Mr. Hayes, you're definitely in the wrong place. The way she said his name, like it tasted bitter, made his chest tight. This wasn't how he'd imagined seeing her again. Hell, he'd stopped imagining it years ago, after the 100th unanswered email and the phone number that led to dead air. Naomi, Ms. Ellison. Her eyes flashed dangerously. And you have 2 minutes to get to your actual interview before you're late. He should leave, should apologize properly and walk away before he made things worse. But 15 years of questions were crowding his throat, and seeing her here, successful, beautiful, and looking at him like he was something she'd scraped off her shoe made him feel like that 23-year-old kid who'd woken up to an empty dorm room and a note that said, "I'm sorry, please don't look for me." "You cut your hair," he said stupidly. Her hand went unconsciously to her neck, fingers tracing the spot where her hair used to fall. For just a moment, her mask slipped, and he caught a glimpse of something vulnerable underneath. A lot of things change in 15 years. She straightened, rebuilding her walls in real time. Room D. Now. Jasper nodded, backing toward the door like a man retreating from a crime scene. It's good to see you, Naomi." She didn't respond, just stood there with coffee stains spreading across her blouse and her shoulders set like she was preparing for battle. As he reached the door, he heard her whisper something that might have been his name or might have been a curse. Conference room D was 3 doors down, and somehow his legs carried him there on autopilot. He spent the next hour answering questions about load-bearing walls and sustainability ratings, while his mind replayed every second of the last 10 minutes. When they offered him the position, senior architect on the Riverside Commons project, he said yes, without really hearing the details. It wasn't until he was in the parking garage, sitting in his car with the engine running, that the full weight of what had happened hit him. Naomi Ellison. After all these years, she was here in Atlanta, running programs and wearing coffee-stained blouses and looking at him like he was a ghost she'd rather forget. His phone buzzed with a text from his ex-wife. "Liam needs new soccer cleats. Your turn to buy them." Jasper stared at the message, then deleted it without responding. Some conversations could wait. Others had been waiting 15 years already. He pulled out of the parking garage and into Atlanta traffic, but his mind was still in conference room C, watching the woman who'd once promised to love him forever wipe coffee from her hands like she was erasing his very existence. Naomi's hands were still shaking when she locked her office door 20 minutes later. The coffee-stained blouse lay crumpled in her desk drawer, replaced by the emergency blazer she kept for exactly these kinds of disasters, though she'd never imagined this particular kind of disaster. Jasper Hayes, in Atlanta, working for Cromwell. She slumped into her ergonomic chair and stared at the framed photo on her desk. Herself and Lena at last month's science fair, both grinning beside Lena's volcano project. Her daughter's gap-toothed smile usually steadied her, but tonight it only made her chest tighter. 14 years old. The math was simple, brutal, and absolutely terrifying now that Jasper was back in her orbit. Her phone buzzed, a text from her assistant. "Carmen, the 3 p.m. meeting got moved to tomorrow. Also, whoever that guy was who spilled coffee everywhere. He got the Riverside job. Thought you should know." Naomi's stomach dropped. The Riverside Commons project. The one she'd been consulting on for 3 months, designing the community center that would serve as the heart of the affordable housing complex, the project that would require her to work closely with the lead architect for the next 6 months. Her office door rattled under an enthusiastic knock. "Mum's having a crisis meeting with a pint of ice cream," came Carmen's voice through the wood. "Should I bring spoons?" Despite everything, Naomi smiled. Carmen Rodriguez had been her assistant for 2 years, but more importantly, she'd become the sister Naomi had never had, the one person who could read her moods like a weather forecast. "Come in," Naomi called, quickly shoving the photo face down. Carmen entered with 2 spoons and a pint of Ben & Jerry's Chunky Monkey. At 26, she had the kind of effortless beauty that made Naomi feel ancient, with dark hair that never seemed to have a bad day and an infectious laugh that could diffuse any workplace tension. "Spill," Carmen said, settling into the chair across from Naomi's desk. "And I don't mean literally this time, though I heard that was quite the entrance. It's complicated. The best stories always are." Carmen popped open the ice cream and handed Naomi a spoon. "Let me guess. Tall, dark, and clumsy is an ex-boyfriend. Something like that. The kind of ex who left you with trust issues and a secret chocolate stash in your desk drawer." Naomi almost choked on her ice cream. "How did you—" "Honey, I've been your assistant for 2 years. I know where you hide everything." Carmen leaned forward conspiratorially. "So what's the story? College sweetheart who broke your heart? High school drama? Ooh, was he married?" "We were together in college," Naomi said carefully. "It ended badly." "Define badly." Naomi's phone rang before she could answer, a lifeline she grabbed gratefully. The caller ID made her smile despite herself. "Lena, drama queen." "Hey, baby," she answered, putting the phone on speaker. "Your mom, emergency," came Lena's voice, slightly breathless. "Mrs. Patterson assigned us to write about our family history, and I need to know about my dad's side for the family tree project." The ice cream turned to concrete in Naomi's mouth. Carmen's eyebrows shot up, clearly reading the panic on her face. We'll talk about it when I get home, okay? But Mom, everyone else knows about both sides of their family. I just have you and Grandma Rose and Uncle Marcus. It's like half my tree is missing. 14 years old and asking the right questions. Naomi had always known this day would come, had practiced her responses in the mirror, but she'd never imagined having this conversation with Jasper Hayes less than an hour back in her life. "Lena, can we please discuss this at home?" "Fine, but I'm making spaghetti tonight, and you know what that means." "Interrogation by carbs," Naomi said, managing a laugh. "I'll be home by 6. After she hung up, Carmen was studying her with the intensity of a forensic investigator. 14 years old, Carmen asked quietly. Naomi nodded, her throat tight. "And college boyfriend who ended badly." "Carmen, please." "Oh, honey." Carmen reached across the desk and squeezed her hand. "That's not just an ex-boyfriend. That's Lena's father." The words hung in the air like a confession. Naomi had never said it out loud to anyone except her mother, had built her entire life around protecting that secret. "He doesn't know," Naomi whispered. "And now he's going to be working here. For 6 months. On my project," Carmen let out a low whistle. "That's not complicated. That's a telenovela waiting to happen." Before Naomi could respond, her computer chimed with a new email. The subject line made her blood run cold. "Riverside Commons, project kickoff meeting. Tomorrow 9 a.m. She clicked it open with trembling fingers. The message was from Richard Cromwell himself, brief and to the point. "Naomi, please coordinate with Jasper Hayes on the Riverside timeline. He'll need access to all existing plans and community feedback reports. Looking forward to seeing this collaboration succeed." Collaboration. The word felt like a joke. "What are you going to do?" Carmen asked softly. Naomi stared at the email, then at the overturned photo of Lena on her desk, her daughter who asked too many questions and had her father's stubborn chin and way of tilting her head when she was thinking. Her daughter who deserved to know where she came from, even if it meant Naomi's carefully constructed world was about to implode. "I'm going to do my job," she said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm going to build affordable housing for families who need it, and I'm going to pretend that seeing Jasper Hayes doesn't feel like being struck by lightning." Carmen nodded slowly. "And if he figures out about Lena?" Naomi looked at the photo again, at her daughter's bright, curious eyes that mirrored ones she'd tried to forget. "Then I guess we'll find out what kind of man he's become." Outside her office window, Atlanta's skyline glowed in the late afternoon sun, full of buildings that had weathered storms and renovations and the passage of time. Some had crumbled under pressure, others had emerged stronger. Tomorrow, she'd find out which kind she was. Jasper arrived at the Cromwell offices 15 minutes early, armed with 2 cups of coffee and what he hoped was a peace offering. He'd spent most of the night staring at his ceiling, replaying every moment of yesterday's disaster, and had come to one conclusion. If he was going to work with Naomi for the next 6 months, he needed to clear the air. The coffee shop barista had looked at him strangely when he'd ordered 1 medium dark roast, 2 sugars, splash of vanilla creamer. Muscle memory from 15 years ago, when he used to surprise Naomi between her morning classes. He wasn't even sure she still drank coffee the same way, but some details were carved into his brain like architectural blueprints. Carmen looked up from her desk as he approached. her expression somewhere between amused and protective. Let me guess, peace offering. Something like that. He held up the cups. Is she in? Conference room B. And Hayes. Carmen's voice stopped him mid-turn. She's been here since 7 a.m., which means she's running on stress and stubbornness. Tread carefully. The advice proved prophetic. When Jasper pushed open the door to conference room B, he found Naomi surrounded by what looked like the architectural equivalent of a war zone. Blueprints covered every surface, sticky notes formed rainbow clusters on the windows, and her laptop was flanked by 3 different notebooks, all filled with her distinctive, precise handwriting. She looked up as he entered, and for a split second, he saw exhaustion flicker across her features before her professional mask slammed back into place. "You're early," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "I brought coffee." He set 1 cup carefully on the table, well away from any important documents. 2 sugars, splash of vanilla. Her hand froze halfway to her pen. For a moment she just stared at the cup like it might explode, and Jasper realized his mistake. Some gestures of familiarity weren't welcome. They were reminders of everything that had been lost. "I don't drink coffee like that anymore," she said quietly. "Right. Of course." He felt heat creep up his neck. "I just thought, let's focus on the project." She gestured to the chair across from her with brisk efficiency. "Richard wants the preliminary designs ready for community review in 3 weeks. The Riverside site is challenging. We're working with the bones of an old textile factory, and the community has very specific needs." Jasper sat down and pulled out his own notes, grateful for the neutral territory of work. "Oh, I've reviewed the initial surveys. The community center is the crown jewel of this project. It's not just a community center." For the first time that morning, real passion entered her voice. "It's going to house childcare, job training programs, healthcare services. For a lot of these families, it'll be the difference between surviving and thriving." As she spoke, spreading out detailed community feedback reports, Jasper found himself watching her hands, still elegant, still expressive, but now adorned with a simple gold band on her right ring finger instead of her left. Not married then, but clearly marking some kind of boundary. "The mothers I've interviewed," she continued, "they need spaces that feel safe but not institutional. Warm but professional, places where their children can play while they're learning new skills or attending health screenings." "You've thought of everything." He wasn't just being polite. Her attention to detail was extraordinary. Every consideration rooted in real human need rather than abstract design principles. "I've had time to think." The comment carried weight, and Jasper felt the familiar tug of old questions. Before he could respond, the door burst open with the kind of enthusiasm that belonged to someone much younger than the man who entered. Daniel Chen bounded in like a golden retriever in human form, all bright smiles and boundless energy. "Naomi, please tell me you have coffee, because the machine downstairs is making sounds like a dying robot," and he stopped short, noticing Jasper. "Oh, hey, you must be the new guy." Daniel Chen, project coordinator and office morale officer. Jasper Hayes. He stood to shake hands, immediately liking Daniel's genuine warmth. "The coffee spiller." Daniel's grin widened. "Already famous around here. Don't worry, Naomi's forgiven worse first impressions. Remember when I accidentally locked myself in the supply closet during my interview? That was you being nervous," Naomi said, but there was fondness in her voice that made something twist uncomfortably in Jasper's chest. "This was just carelessness." "Ouch." Daniel clutched his chest dramatically. "She wounds with such precision. It's one of her many talents." The easy banter between them was obvious, comfortable in a way that spoke of shared history and inside jokes. Daniel's interest in Naomi was equally obvious, the way his eyes lingered on her face, how he found excuses to lean closer when pointing out details on the blueprints. "Daniel handles community outreach," Naomi explained to Jasper. "He'll be your point person for resident feedback during the design process." "Great," Jasper said, meaning it. Daniel seemed like the kind of person who could smooth over any rough edges, which this project would definitely need. So, Hayes, what's your story? Daniel settled into a chair, clearly ready for a getting-to-know-you session. Atlanta native, family man, secret superhero identity, recently divorced, Jasper said automatically, then wondered why that was the first thing out of his mouth. No kids of my own. Moved here from Charleston after... He glanced at Naomi, who had gone very still. After my practice dissolved. His loss is our gain, Daniel said cheerfully. And hey, Atlanta's a great city for fresh starts. Isn't that right, Naomi? You've been here, what, 15 years? Something like that. Her voice was carefully neutral, but Jasper caught the slight emphasis on 15 years, right around when she disappeared from his life. Well, this calls for a celebration, Daniel announced. Office tradition for new team members. Drinks at Murphy's after work. You in, Hayes? Naomi, you should come too. When's the last time you did something that wasn't work-related? I have plans, Naomi said quickly. Come on, one drink. You can't hide behind spreadsheets forever. Something in Daniel's tone, affectionate but persistent, made Jasper's jaw clench. The territorial feeling was ridiculous, given that he had no claim on Naomi's time or attention, but 15 years hadn't dimmed his ability to read the subtext in her body language. She was uncomfortable, and Daniel wasn't picking up on it. She said she has plans, Jasper said quietly. Both Daniel and Naomi looked at him in surprise. Daniel with raised eyebrows, Naomi with something that might have been gratitude flickering across her features. Right, Daniel said, his smile faltering slightly. Of course. Rain check? Maybe, Naomi said, already gathering her papers. I need to pick up my daughter from school. Daughter. The word hit Jasper like a physical blow. Of course she had a daughter. 15 years was a lifetime, enough time to build a family, create a whole world he knew nothing about. The rational part of his brain had known this was possible, but hearing it confirmed made something twist painfully in his chest. How old? He asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. Naomi's hands stilled on the blueprints. I'm 14. The number hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that made Jasper's mouth go dry. 14 years. He did the math automatically, the way he calculated load-bearing weights and structural stress, a habit that had saved his career more than once. But this calculation might destroy everything he thought he knew about his past. 14, he repeated slowly. Naomi's eyes met his for the first time that morning, and in them he saw something that might have been fear or regret or a plea for him not to ask the questions that were crowding his throat. Daniel, oblivious to the undercurrents, was already moving toward the door. Well, I'll let you two get back to designing our masterpiece. Hayes, welcome to the team. This is going to be fun. As the door closed behind him, silence settled over the conference room like dust after a demolition. Jasper stared at Naomi, who was carefully organizing papers that didn't need organizing, and tried to find words for questions he wasn't sure he was ready to have answered. 14 years old, the blueprint for his future had just developed some very serious structural problems. Naomi's hands gripped the steering wheel like it was an anchor as she sat in the pickup line at Riverside Prep. The same math that had haunted her for 14 years was now echoing in someone else's head, and the thought made her nauseous. He knows, or suspects, the way he repeated 14 like he was solving an equation. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carmen. How did the meeting go? Do I need to update your LinkedIn to former project manager, current fugitive? Before she could respond, another message appeared, this one from an unknown number. We need to talk. Jasper. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Carmen must have given him her number, probably thinking she was being helpful. The cursor blinked in the text box, waiting for her response. But what could she possibly say? Sure. Let's discuss how I've been lying by omission for 14 years. A tap on her passenger window made her jump. Lena's face appeared, pressed against the glass with that particular teenage expression that meant trouble. Mom, why do you look like you've seen a ghost? Lena asked as she slid into the passenger seat, her backpack hitting the floor with a thud that suggested it contained the entire contents of her locker. Long day at work, Naomi managed, pulling out of the school zone. How was your day? Terrible. Amazing. Confusing. Lena pulled her phone from her pocket and immediately began typing. Mrs. Patterson extended the family tree project deadline because half the class was having existential crises about their ancestry. Naomi's stomach dropped. Did you tell her you needed more time? No, I told her I was going to interview you properly tonight. With, actual questions and everything. Lena looked up from her phone, dark eyes sparkling with determination. I made a list. A list! 23 questions. I was very thorough. Of course you were. Lena had inherited her father's methodical approach to everything, from homework to understanding the world around her. It was one of a dozen traits that made Naomi's chest ache every time she noticed them. Lena, sweetheart. Mum, I'm 14. I'm not asking you to draw me a map to your diary or explain your college love life. I just want to know basic stuff about my dad. Lena's voice carried that particular teenage mix of exasperation and vulnerability. Does he have allergies? Because I'm allergic to shellfish and you're not, so it had to come from somewhere. Does he play music? I got into jazz band and you're tone deaf. Each question was a small knife twist. Jasper had been allergic to shellfish. She'd learned that the hard way during a disastrous date at a seafood restaurant sophomore year, and he'd played guitar, fingers moving over strings like he was coaxing secrets from the wood. It's complicated, baby. Everything's complicated when you're 14. Lena tucked her phone away and turned to face her mother fully. But Mrs. Patterson says family stories help us understand who we are, and I feel like I'm missing half of mine. They pulled into the driveway of their small house in Grant Park, a neighborhood that had gone from sketchy to hip to almost too expensive in the years since Naomi had bought her fixer-upper. The house had been her first real investment in building a life in Atlanta, complete with a garden she'd never quite mastered and a front porch that caught the morning sun. How about we make that spaghetti you promised, Naomi said, and we'll talk. The real talk or the let's discuss this when you're older. Talk. Real talk. The words came out steadier than she felt. Addiction as real as I know how to be. An hour later, they sat at the kitchen table with bowls of pasta and what Lena had dubbed interrogation garlic bread. Her daughter had arranged her questions on index cards like a tiny investigative journalist, complete with follow-up inquiries written in purple ink. Okay, question 1, Lena said, consulting her cards. What's my dad's full name? Jasper Hayes. Saying it aloud felt like releasing a breath she'd been holding for 14 years. Jasper. Lena tested the name, tilting her head in that achingly familiar way. That's actually cool. Was he named after someone? His grandfather, a jazz musician from New Orleans. Naomi found herself smiling despite everything. He used to joke that music was in his DNA, but he got the architecture gene instead. He's an architect. Lena's eyes lit up. Is that why I'm good at building things? Remember my bridge project last year? It held 47 pounds before it collapsed. I remember. Naomi also remembered Jasper building elaborate card houses in their dorm room, the same focused concentration on his face that Lena wore when she was problem-solving. Question 2. Where did you meet him? College. University of Georgia. We were both sophomores. Question 3. Why did you break up? The simple question hit like a meteor. How could she explain that they hadn't really broken up? That she'd discovered she was pregnant during finals week, had panicked about derailing both their futures, and had made the decision to disappear rather than burden him with a choice that might destroy everything he'd worked for. And we were young, she said carefully. We wanted different things. That's not really an answer, Mom. It's the answer I have right now. Lena studied her mother's face with the intensity of someone who'd inherited a double dose of analytical genes. Question 4. Does he know about me? The fork fell from Naomi's hand, clattering against her bowl. Why would you ask that? Because you get this look whenever I ask about him. Like you're keeping a secret that's too big for your face. Lena leaned forward. And because if he knew about me and never tried to contact me, that would be really sad. But if he doesn't know about me, that's just complicated. Too smart for her own good. Another trait from her father. He doesn't know, Naomi whispered. Why not? Because I was scared. Because I thought I was protecting everyone. Because I was 19 and terrified, and maybe I made the wrong choice. The words tumbled out before she could stop them, 15 years of guilt and second-guessing pouring onto her kitchen table like spilled wine. Lena was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, do you think he'd want to know? Before Naomi could answer, her phone buzzed again. The same unknown number. Naomi, please, I just need to understand. Can we meet somewhere neutral? Coffee shop, park. I won't ambush you at work again. Mom, you're doing that face thing again. Naomi looked at her daughter, at Jasper's stubborn chin and questioning eyes, and the way she worried her bottom lip when she was thinking. At 14 years of birthday parties and science fairs and bedtime stories and proud moments that had belonged to just the two of them. Actually, she said slowly, I think you might get the chance to ask him yourself. Lena's eyes went wide. He's here, in Atlanta. He started working at my company yesterday. Yesterday, and you didn't tell me? Lena's voice hit a pitch that probably bothered dogs 3 blocks away. Mom, this is huge. This is like movie-level dramatic coincidence. Huge. It's complicated. Stop saying that. Lena jumped up from her chair, pacing the small kitchen with nervous energy. This is the opposite of complicated. This is simple. He's here, I'm here, you're here. We're all here in the same city at the same time. That's like the universe giving us a second chance. If only it were that simple. But looking at her daughter's face, bright with possibility and hope, Naomi felt something shift in her chest. Maybe Lena was right. Maybe some things were simpler than fear made them seem. What do you want me to do? She asked. I want to meet him. Lena sat back down, suddenly serious. And I want to know where I got my weird toes and why I laugh like a seal when something's really funny. I want to know if he thinks about me sometimes, or if he would have wanted to be my dad if he'd known. Naomi's phone buzzed again. I'll wait as long as you need me to, but we both know this conversation has to happen. She looked at the message, then at her daughter, then at the family tree project scattered across their table with its half-empty branches waiting to be filled. Okay, she said quietly, let me figure out how. For the first time in 14 years, the future felt like something other than a carefully managed secret. It felt like a choice waiting to be made. The Highland Bakery on Virginia Avenue felt like neutral territory, busy enough for privacy, familiar enough for comfort, and far enough from Cromwell's offices to avoid curious colleagues. Naomi had chosen the corner booth by instinct, the same one where she used to grade papers during her brief stint as a substitute teacher when Lena was little. She arrived 10 minutes early and ordered tea instead of coffee, her hands too shaky for caffeine. The morning crowd provided perfect camouflage, freelancers with laptops, stay-at-home mums stealing an hour of solitude, and retirees lingering over newspapers and memories. Jasper appeared in the doorway exactly on time, scanning the room until his eyes found hers. He looked like he hadn't slept, his usually precise appearance slightly rumpled, as if he'd been running his hands through his hair for hours. When he approached the table, she noticed he was carrying a manila folder, evidence, documentation, the kind of preparation that screamed architect's mind at work. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. His voice was careful, neutral, like he was approaching a skittish animal. "I wasn't sure I would." The honesty surprised them both. "But you did." "I did." They sat in awkward silence for a moment, the weight of 15 years pressing down like atmospheric pressure. A barista called out drink orders in the background, and somewhere near the window, a baby was making those gurgling sounds that always made Naomi think of Lena at that age. "I've been doing math," Jasper said finally. "You always were good at that." Naomi, her name was a plea. "Please don't make this harder than it already is." She looked at him properly for the first time since he'd sat down. The boy she'd known had grown into his features. The sharp angles of his face had softened slightly. and there were lines around his eyes that spoke of laughter and worry in equal measure, but his hands were the same, long-fingered and expressive, drumming against the table in a rhythm she remembered from late-night study sessions. "Ah, what do you want me to say?" she asked. "I want you to tell me if I have a daughter." The words hung between them like a bridge she wasn't sure she was ready to cross. In her purse, her phone buzzed with what was probably another text from Lena, who had spent breakfast crafting increasingly elaborate plans for meeting her father. "Maybe we could accidentally run into him at the grocery store, or I could show up at your office for a surprise visit. Or we could hire a flash mob. Her name is Lena," Naomi said quietly. Jasper's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, wonder, fear, something that might have been joy. He opened the manila folder with trembling fingers and pulled out a printed email. The subject line read, "Riverside Commons Community Feedback Summary." "I found this in the project files," he said. "You wrote about a 14-year-old girl who helped with the resident interviews. My daughter Lena has been invaluable in connecting with the children in the community. Her perspective has helped shape our understanding of what kids need in a safe space." Naomi remembered writing that report, remembered being proud of how naturally Lena had connected with the younger children during the focus groups. She'd never imagined it would become evidence in the case of her own unraveling. "You named her Lena," Jasper continued, his voice thick with something that might have been tears, "after your grandmother. You remember?" "I remember everything, Naomi. I remember you telling me about your grandmother's garden, how she grew herbs and sang while she worked. I remember you saying that if you ever had a daughter, you'd want her to have that kind of strength." He looked up from the paper. "Oh, I remember the last time I saw you. Jasper, December 15th. You said you were going home for winter break early, that your mum needed help with something. You kissed me goodbye in the parking lot behind the library, and you promised you'd call when you got home." His voice cracked slightly. "You never called." The memory hit her like a physical blow. She'd been 12 weeks pregnant and showing just enough that her winter coat had become essential camouflage. She'd known that if she stayed another day, another hour, she'd tell him everything and watch his carefully planned future crumble under the weight of unexpected responsibility. "I was scared," she whispered. "Of me, of everything, of derailing your dreams, of being the reason you didn't get into graduate school or land that internship you wanted so badly, of watching you resent me or her or the life we didn't plan, so you decided for both of us." The accusation stung because it was true. "I was 19, Jasper. I was pregnant and terrified and absolutely certain that I was going to ruin everything you'd worked for. Did it ever occur to you that maybe I would have wanted to be ruined?" The question hit her sideways. In all her careful calculations and worst-case scenarios, she'd never considered that he might have chosen them over his dreams, that maybe what she'd seen as burden, he might have seen as blessing. "I thought about calling," she said, 1,000 times, when she was born, when she took her first steps, when she started school. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time she did something that reminded me of you. "What kind of things?" The question was so soft, so hopeful, that it nearly broke her heart. "She builds things, constantly. Lego cities, blanket forts, elaborate marble runs that take over half the house. She approaches problems like puzzles, turning them around until she finds the angle that makes sense." She smiled despite the tears threatening to spill. "Now she has your laugh." "My laugh?" "That surprise bark when something catches you off guard. And she tilts her head when she's thinking, just like you used to do during calculus." Jasper was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the catalogue of inherited traits. "What else?" "She's brilliant, top of her class, but not in that pressured way. She just loves learning. She wants to understand how everything works." Naomi pulled out her phone, scrolling until she found a recent photo. This is her science fair project from last month. The picture showed Lena grinning beside an elaborate volcano diorama, complete with working lava flow and a detailed explanation of geological processes. But Jasper wasn't looking at the project. He was staring at Lena's face with an expression of absolute wonder. "She has your eyes," he said finally, and your stubborn streak. Is she happy?" The question revealed everything. Not is she healthy or does she need anything, but is she happy? Even after 15 years of absence, his first concern was her emotional well-being. Most of the time. But she's been asking questions lately about her father, about why she doesn't know anything about half her family tree. Naomi took a shaky breath. "She wants to meet you. She knows about me, as of last night. I told her your name, that you're an architect, that you didn't know about her, and she still wants to meet me. She's 14. To her, this is the most romantic story ever, star-crossed lovers reunited by fate, a father who never knew he had a daughter, the chance for a fairy tale ending." Jasper laughed, and the sound was exactly like Lena's surprised bark of delight. And what do you think?" Naomi looked at him across the table, at this man who'd known her when she was barely more than a girl, who'd loved her before life taught them both about compromise and disappointment and the way dreams could splinter under pressure. He was different now, older and weathered by his own losses, but underneath she could still see traces of the boy who'd built card houses and promised her forever. "I think," she said carefully, "that some stories don't get fairy tale endings, but maybe they get something better." "What's better than a fairy tale?" "The truth, messy and complicated and real." She met his eyes. "Do you want to meet her?" "I've wanted to meet her since the moment I realized she existed," he said without hesitation. "But Naomi, I need you to know, I'm not going to try to step in and play daddy after missing 14 years. I don't have that right." "Then what do you want?" "I want to know my daughter. I want to be whatever she needs me to be, even if that's just a guy who shows up for school plays and remembers her birthday." For the first time in 15 years, Naomi felt like she could breathe fully. "Her birthday is September 8th. September 8th. He repeated it like a prayer, like a date he'd never forget again. "And she's performing in the school's jazz ensemble next Friday. If you want to come, I'll be there." Outside the bakery windows, Atlanta was waking up to another ordinary day. But inside their corner booth, two people were carefully constructing the blueprint for something that had never existed before. A family built on second chances and the courage to tell the truth, however belatedly. It wasn't a fairy tale, but maybe, Naomi thought, it was something better. The Riverside construction site looked like a war zone on Thursday afternoon. What had started as a routine inspection with the city planning office had turned into a 3-hour marathon of structural concerns, permit clarifications, and increasingly creative solutions to problems that shouldn't have existed in the first place. Naomi stood in what would eventually become the community center's main gathering space, her hard hat slightly askew and her patience wearing thinner than the October air. Beside her, Jasper was deep in conversation with the city inspector, his hands moving in the precise gestures she remembered from their college days when he'd tried to explain complex concepts using nothing but air and determination. "Donal, the load-bearing modifications are within code," he was saying, pointing to a section of exposed beamwork. "We've reinforced the foundation beyond the original specifications to accommodate the increased occupancy." "I understand that, Mr. Hayes, but the original permits were filed for a different configuration. Any significant changes require—" "I have the amended permits right here," Naomi interrupted, pulling a folder from her bag with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to anticipate bureaucratic roadblocks. "Filed 2 weeks ago, approved yesterday morning." The inspector, a thin man whose perpetual frown suggested he'd never met a permit he couldn't find fault with, examined the documents with the intensity of someone searching for buried treasure or buried problems. Daniel appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath from climbing 3 flights of stairs in a building without working elevators. "The community representatives are here for the walkthrough," he announced, "and Mrs. Rodriguez wants to know if we can show her where the childcare area will be." "Perfect timing," Naomi muttered. watching dark clouds gather outside the windows with the kind of ominous speed that meant Atlanta weather was about to remind everyone who was really in charge. The next hour passed in a blur of explanations, measurements, and increasingly frequent glances at the sky. The community representatives, 5 women who would be among the first residents, had thoughtful questions about security, accessibility, and whether the planned playground would be visible from the community center's main windows. "Safety is everything," explained Mrs. Rodriguez, a woman in her 50s whose gentle voice carried the authority of someone who'd raised 4 children, mostly on her own. "We need to know our babies are safe while we're learning job skills or attending health screenings. The design includes clear sight lines from every program room to the playground," Jasper assured her, pulling out his tablet to show the digital renderings. "And the childcare space has direct access to both the indoor play area and the outdoor facilities." As he spoke, Naomi found herself watching him with something that felt dangerously close to pride. He was in his element here, translating architectural concepts into human needs with the kind of passion that had first attracted her 15 years ago. Some things, apparently, didn't change. The first crack of thunder made everyone jump. "We should wrap this up," Daniel said, eyeing the windows as the first fat raindrops began to splatter against the glass. The forecast said possible showers, not apocalyptic downpour. As if summoned by his words, the sky opened with the kind of sudden violence that only October storms could muster. Rain didn't fall so much as attack, turning the construction site into a muddy obstacle course and the parking area into a series of rapidly forming lakes. "The cars," Mrs. Rodriguez said, looking out at the lot where their vehicles were quickly disappearing under sheets of water. "We're not going anywhere for a while," Naomi observed, watching a piece of construction equipment float past like a very expensive boat. Daniel pulled out his phone, squinting at the screen. "Weather service says this should pass in an hour or 2. We've got power here, and there's a coffee station set up in the trailer." "Actually," Jasper said, "there are some folding chairs in what will be the conference room, and I brought sandwiches for lunch that I never got around to eating." An hour later, they were gathered in the bare bones of the future community space, sharing turkey sandwiches and bottled water while rain hammered against the windows with impressive persistence. The city inspector had declared the building structurally sound and departed in a taxi, muttering about weather apps that couldn't predict their way out of a paper bag. Mrs. Rodriguez was telling stories about her youngest daughter's college plans, while 2 of the other women debated the merits of different job training programs. Daniel was entertaining everyone with increasingly elaborate theories about why Atlanta weather was personally vindictive, and Naomi found herself relaxing for the first time in days. "This is nice," she said without thinking. "Getting trapped in a construction site during a biblical flood?" Jasper asked, settling into the folding chair beside her. "No, this," she gestured around the room, "seeing the space with people in it, imagining how it's going to feel when it's finished." "Community," Mrs. Rodriguez said, overhearing, "that's what this is going to be. Not just apartments and services, but actual community. People who know each other's names, who watch out for each other's children. That's the idea," Naomi agreed. "Safe spaces where families can grow and thrive. Like a family," added one of the younger women, Maria, who was expecting her second child. "But bigger." Jasper was quiet beside her, but Naomi could feel him thinking. She'd learned to read his silences 15 years ago. The difference between contemplative quiet and worried quiet, between processing information and wrestling with emotions. "Penny for your thoughts," she said softly, while the others debated the relative merits of different playground equipment. "I was thinking about family," he said, "about how it's not always blood relations and shared DNA. Sometimes it's people who choose to show up for each other." Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. "Jasper, I've been thinking about Friday night, about meeting Lena." He turned to face her, and she saw vulnerability flickering in his eyes. "What if she doesn't like me? What if I say the wrong thing, or I'm not what she's hoping for? The question was so quietly terrified that it nearly broke her heart. She's going to love you. You can't know that. I can. Because she's smart and kind and curious, and you're her father. Because some connections run deeper than time or circumstances. She paused. And because she's been practicing conversation starters for 3 days. Conversation starters. She has a list, written on index cards, color-coded by topic. Naomi smiled. She's your daughter, Jasper. She approaches everything like a project that needs proper planning. For the first time since Tuesday's coffee shop revelation, Jasper laughed, really laughed, the sound echoing off the bare walls of their temporary shelter. "What kind of topics?" he asked. "Architecture, obviously, music, her theory about why pineapple belongs on pizza, the periodic table song she learned in chemistry class." Naomi ticked them off on her fingers. "But she's particularly excited to discuss your thoughts on sustainable building materials. She's 14, and she wants to discuss sustainable building materials. She's your daughter," Naomi repeated. "She wants to discuss everything." Outside, the storm was beginning to ease, rain softening from assault to persistent drumming. But inside their improvised gathering space, surrounded by the bones of something good being built, Naomi felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the sense that maybe they were all exactly where they needed to be. "Are you nervous?" Jasper asked. Terrified, she admitted, but also excited. She's been half a person her whole life, missing pieces she didn't even know she was missing. Tomorrow night, she gets to meet the other half of her story. "And you?" The question caught her off guard. "What about me? Do you get to meet the other half of your story too?" Before she could answer, Daniel's voice cut through their quiet conversation. "Ladies and gentlemen, the great flood of Riverside Commons appears to be receding. I think we might actually make it out of here alive." But as they gathered their things and prepared to venture back into the world, Naomi found herself thinking about Jasper's question. Tomorrow night, Lena would meet her father for the first time. But maybe, just maybe, she and Jasper would meet each other again too, not as the kids they'd been, but as the people they'd become. The storm had passed. Now came the harder part, rebuilding in the aftermath. Jasper sat in his car in the Riverside Prep parking lot for exactly 7 minutes, watching parents stream into the auditorium while he tried to remember how to breathe like a normal human being. He'd changed clothes 3 times that morning, finally settling on dark jeans and a button-down that he hoped struck the right balance between approachable and respectful. The flowers on the passenger seat, a small bouquet of sunflowers that the florist had assured him were perfect for a first meeting, seemed increasingly ridiculous. What if she hates sunflowers? What if she's allergic? What if she takes one look at me and decides her life was better without a father? His phone buzzed. A text from Naomi, 3rd row, left side. She's wearing a blue dress and she's nervous too. The message steadied him somehow. They were all nervous. This was uncharted territory for everyone involved. The auditorium was typical high school, multi-purpose, fold-out chairs, a stage that had seen better decades, and acoustic tiles that had probably been white sometime during the Clinton administration. But the energy in the room was electric, filled with the particular combination of pride and anxiety that marked every parent in attendance. He spotted Naomi immediately, sitting exactly where she'd said, her hands folded in her lap, with the kind of careful composure that meant she was fighting to stay calm. Beside her sat an older woman with silver hair and laugh lines that spoke of a lifetime of joy. Naomi's mother, he realized, the grandmother who'd helped raise Lena. As he approached their row, Naomi looked up and offered a smile that was equal parts welcome and warning. "Be careful with us, Mrs. Ellison," he said, extending his hand to Naomi's mother. "I'm Jasper Hayes." Rose Ellison had the kind of grip that spoke of decades working in her garden and raising strong women. She studied his face with the intensity of someone conducting a job interview for the position of daughter's father. "So you're the one," she said finally. You look like her. Mom, Lena, around the eyes. And you have the same way of standing when you're nervous, like you're trying to take up less space than you actually need. Before he could respond, the lights dimmed and the curtain rose on the Riverside Prep Jazz Ensemble. 15 teenagers in black dress clothes arranged themselves on stage with the particular combination of confidence and terror that marked every high school performance. And there she was. Lena stood in the second row, clarinet poised, wearing a navy blue dress that made her look older than 14 and more beautiful than any father was prepared to handle. Her hair was pulled back in a style that showcased the elegant line of her neck, Naomi's neck, but when she scanned the audience and found their section, her smile was pure, uncomplicated joy that lit up her entire face. Their eyes met across the crowded auditorium, and Jasper felt something fundamental shift in his chest. This wasn't abstract anymore. This wasn't a concept or a revelation or a complication. This was his daughter, looking at him for the first time with curiosity and hope, and absolutely no idea how completely she'd just reorganized his understanding of everything that mattered. She gave him a small wave, just her fingers, really, wiggling at her side, and he waved back, probably looking like an idiot but not caring even a little bit. The ensemble launched into their first number, a jazzy arrangement of Fly Me to the Moon that showcased the kind of youthful enthusiasm that made up for any technical imperfections. But Jasper wasn't really hearing the music. He was watching Lena, the way she lost herself in the performance, the slight sway of her body as she played, the concentration that drew her eyebrows together in an expression he recognized from his own mirror. "She practices in her room every night," Naomi whispered. "Sometimes I hear her playing the same passage over and over until she gets it perfect. Perfectionist, stubborn, like someone else I know." During the brief intermission, while the ensemble rearranged themselves for their second set, Lena caught his eye again and pointed to her clarinet, then gave him an enthusiastic thumbs up. The gesture was so purely teenage, so full of "look what I can do, Daddy" energy, that Jasper had to blink back something that felt suspiciously like tears. "She's remarkable," he managed. "She's terrified she's going to mess up the solo in the next song," Rose said with grandmother's intuition. "But she'll be perfect. She always is when it matters." The second half featured Lena stepping forward for a solo in Autumn Leaves, a haunting melody that seemed to fill every corner of the auditorium. Her tone was clear and sweet, with just enough teenage uncertainty to make it heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time. As she played, Jasper found himself thinking about all the moments he'd missed: first words, first steps, first day of school, first triumph, and all the moments that might still be waiting if he was brave enough to reach for them. When the ensemble finished to enthusiastic applause, Lena's eyes immediately found theirs in the audience. She was glowing with the particular radiance that came from nailing a performance in front of people who mattered. "Now what?" Jasper asked as the crowd began to disperse. "Now she changes out of her concert dress and comes to find us in the lobby," Naomi said, "and you two actually meet. Any advice?" "She's going to ask you about 15 questions in the first 30 seconds, Rose warned with evident amusement. "She's been planning this conversation like a military operation." "I heard about the index cards. Color-coded," Naomi confirmed. "The blue for getting to know you questions, green for architecture, yellow for family history." "What color for? Why weren't you around for 14 years? "Red," Rose said matter-of-factly. "But she probably won't start with those. She's saving the hard ones for when she's decided whether she likes you." The lobby filled with families congratulating their young musicians, and Jasper found himself scanning every face for the one that belonged to him. When Lena finally appeared, she'd changed into jeans and a sweater that made her look younger and somehow more nervous than she had on stage. She approached them with the particular combination of confidence and uncertainty that marked every important teenage moment, clutching a small notebook that Jasper suspected contained the famous conversation starters. "Hi," she said, stopping just out of handshake range, like she wasn't quite sure what the protocol was for meeting your biological father for the first time. "Hi," he replied, equally uncertain. "You were amazing up there. Thanks. I only missed 2 notes, and they were both in the same measure, so technically it was just one mistake that lasted longer than it should have." The explanation was so perfectly analytical, so thoroughly focused on accuracy over emotion, that Jasper felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. "That's very precise thinking," he said. "Mom says I get that from you." She tilted her head, studying his face with open curiosity. "And along with the height and the nose and the way I organize my school supplies." "You organize your school supplies?" "Color-coded binders, labeled sections, backup pens in case the primary writing instruments failed during important tests." She grinned. "Mom says it's excessive. I prefer thorough." "Thorough is good. Thorough builds strong bridges." "Do you want to see my notebook?" she asked, holding up the small journal. "I wrote down things I wanted to ask you, but now that you're actually here, they seem kind of stupid." "I'd love to see your notebook," Jasper said. "And I bet none of your questions are stupid." "Okay, but fair warning. Question number 1 is, what's your favorite color? Because Mom said starting with easy stuff would be less weird for everyone." "Blue," he said immediately. "A deep blue, like the color of the sky right before a storm." "Mine too!" Lena's face lit up with the delight of finding common ground. "Mom's is green, which is fine, but blue is obviously superior." "Obviously," Jasper agreed, and meant it completely. As they stood there in the crowded lobby, father and daughter exchanging favorite colors and discussing the superiority of thorough planning, Jasper realized that some of the most important conversations in life started with the simplest questions. Question number 1, complete. About 1,000 more to go. 3 weeks after the jazz concert, Jasper had settled into a routine that felt both natural and surreal. Saturday morning coffee with Lena at the Highland Bakery, her choice, because she'd declared it neutral territory for getting-to-know-you conversations. Tuesday evening dinners at Naomi's house, where he helped with homework and pretended not to notice that Lena was systematically working through her color-coded question cards. And every day at work, the careful dance of professional collaboration with the woman who'd once known him better than he knew himself. It was working, mostly. "The community center design is coming together beautifully," Naomi said, spreading the latest blueprints across her desk. They'd moved their project meetings to her office after Carmen had pointed out that Conference Room C still smelled faintly of coffee and regret. "The playground sightlines are perfect," Jasper agreed, pointing to the section they'd revised 3 times. "Mrs. Rodriguez will be able to see the entire play area from the job training classroom." Speaking of Mrs. Rodriguez, she wants to throw a progress celebration next month. Something informal at the site, maybe with food trucks and music. Naomi made a note in her ever-present planner. She's calling it a community building party. "That sounds..." "Jasper." Carmen's voice came through the open door, accompanied by the sound of hurried footsteps. "Your daughter is here." The words sent a familiar jolt of surprise and joy through his chest. Your daughter, 3 weeks in, and the phrase still felt like a minor miracle every time someone said it. "She's supposed to be in school," Naomi said, checking her watch with the automatic concern of a mother whose teenager had deviated from the established schedule. Lena appeared in the doorway, still wearing her Riverside prep uniform, but looking decidedly unschool-like. Her usually neat hair was slightly disheveled, her backpack was slung over one shoulder like she'd been running, and she was clutching something against her chest with the protective intensity of someone guarding state secrets. "Hey, baby," Naomi said, immediately switching to mom mode. "What's wrong? Are you sick? Did something happen at school?" "I'm fine. School's fine." "Everything's fine." Lena's words came out in a rush that suggested everything was definitely not fine. I needed to bring you something." "Couldn't it wait until tonight?" Naomi asked gently. "Your dad and I are in the middle of a project meeting. It's about Dad, kind of. Sort of. Actually, it's completely about Dad, and I think maybe I did something terrible, and I need to fix it before I lose my nerve." Lena's eyes darted between them, and Jasper noticed she was holding what looked like a journal, leather-bound and worn, like something that had been handled frequently over many years. "Lena," Naomi said slowly, and there was something in her voice that made Jasper's attention sharpen. "Ooh, what is that?" "I found it when I was looking for my birth certificate for the family tree project. It was in the box with all my baby stuff, underneath the hospital bracelet and the first photos." Lena held up the journal like evidence in a trial. "Mom, why didn't you tell me you wrote to him?" The color drained from Naomi's face so quickly that Jasper stood up automatically, some instinct telling him to be ready to catch her if she fell. "Lena, give me that," Naomi said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There are letters, Dad, letters she wrote to you but never sent. Hundreds of them. She wrote to you when I was born, when I took my first steps, when I started school, when I lost my first tooth. She wrote to you every Christmas and every birthday, and every time something important happened." Lena's voice cracked slightly. "She never stopped writing to you." Jasper felt the world tilt sideways. "Naomi, it wasn't... I didn't mean for anyone to find those..." Naomi was staring at the journal like it was a loaded weapon. "Lena, please. Listen to this," Lena said, opening to a page marked with a faded ribbon. "Dear Jasper," Lena said, "Dada today, even though there's no Dada here to hear it. I know she's not really calling for you, she's just making sounds, but it broke my heart anyway. I wonder if you would have cried when you heard it, like I did." "Lena, stop!" Naomi's voice was raw, but Lena continued, flipping pages with the determination of someone who decided that secrets had been kept long enough. "Dear Jasper, she's walking now, 11 months old and toddling around like she owns the world. She has your confidence, even at this age. She falls down and gets right back up, like failure isn't even a possibility worth considering." "That's enough," Naomi said, standing abruptly. "No, it's not enough." Lena's teenage composure finally cracked. "You wrote to him for 14 years, Mom. 14 years of letters you never sent, telling him everything about my life, sharing every moment you thought he should know about, and you never told me. I was protecting you. From what? From knowing that you missed him too, from understanding that this wasn't just about me having a father, but about you losing the person you loved." Lena's voice rose with the particular intensity that only teenagers could achieve when they felt betrayed by the adults they trusted most. Jasper stood frozen between them, holding pieces of a story he'd never known existed. "You wrote to me. It was just a way to process things," Naomi said, her professional composure crumbling. "When she was little, I used to imagine what I would tell you if I could. What you'd want to know. It helped me think through decisions. Like you were still part of the conversation even though you weren't there. But you never sent them. What would have been the point? You'd moved on. You probably had a life, a career, maybe a family of your own. Getting a letter from your college girlfriend telling you that you had a daughter you never knew about, what good would that have done anyone?" "It might have done me some good," Jasper said quietly. Lena held out the journal toward him. "She wrote about you too, about how much she missed you, about whether she made the right choice, about hoping you were happy even though she wasn't." Her voice softened. "Mom, some of these letters. You were so sad. I was young and scared and making the best decisions I knew how to make," Naomi said, but her voice had lost its defensive edge. Jasper took the journal with hands that weren't quite steady. The leather was soft with age, and when he opened it, the first thing he saw was his name written in Naomi's careful handwriting at the top of a page dated 15 years ago. "Dear Jasper, I have something to tell you, and I don't know how to say it. And I can't read this," he said, closing the journal carefully. "Not without your permission." Naomi looked at him with something that might have been surprise. They're just letters, things I needed to say but couldn't. They're 15 years of your thoughts and feelings about our daughter, about us, about choices you made that affected all of our lives." He held the journal out to her. "If you want me to read them, I will, but it has to be your choice. For a long moment, the three of them stood in tableau, mother, father, and daughter, navigating the complicated landscape of truth and consequences, and the courage it took to let someone else read your heart. Keep it, Naomi said finally. But maybe we could read some of them together, so I can explain the context, or answer questions, or just be there when you see how lost I was sometimes. We could do that, Jasper agreed. Can I be there too? Lena asked. I mean, they're about me, right? And I've already read some of them, so it's not like I don't know what's in there. Naomi looked at her daughter, at this young woman who'd just forced a family reckoning with the fearless directness that only teenagers possessed, and smiled through what might have been tears. Yeah, she said. I think maybe it's time we all knew the whole story. Outside Naomi's office windows, Atlanta hummed with its usual energy, but inside, three people were preparing to build something that had never existed before, a family founded on complete honesty, however painful the truth might be. Some foundations, Jasper thought, were worth the difficult excavation required to build them properly. The reading happened on a Sunday afternoon in Naomi's living room, 3 weeks after Lena's dramatic revelation at the office. They'd planned it like a family meeting, coffee for the adults, hot chocolate for Lena, and a carefully neutral arrangement on the couch that put the journal within reach of all three of them. We don't have to read all of them, Naomi said for the 4th time, her hands fidgeting with the edge of a throw pillow. Some of them are just processing, working through feelings, not necessarily meant for anyone else's eyes. Mom, Lena said with the patient tone teenagers reserve for particularly dense adults, we've been planning this for 3 weeks. I've already read the first year's worth, and Dad says he's ready. Stop stalling. Jasper opened the journal to the first entry, dated 2 months before Lena's birth. The handwriting was shaky, uncertain, nothing like Naomi's usual precise script. December 20th, he read aloud. Dear Jasper, I'm 7 months pregnant, and I still don't know how to tell you. Every time I pick up the phone, I imagine your voice changing when you hear the news. I imagine disappointment or panic or that awful silence you do when you're trying to figure out how to fix something that can't be fixed. I never did awful silence, Jasper protested mildly. You absolutely did awful silence, Naomi said, smiling despite the tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. Remember when I told you I'd failed my statistics midterm? You went completely quiet for like 30 seconds while you mentally calculated whether my GPA could survive it. That's not awful silence. That's helpful analysis. It's the same thing, Lena said. I do it too. Mom calls it my processing face. Jasper continued reading. I keep thinking about that night we talked about our 5-year plans. You had it all mapped out. Graduate school, internship with that firm in Boston, travel to study European architecture. You were so excited about your future, so certain about what you wanted. How do I tell you that I'm about to change everything? The words hit like a physical blow. He remembered that conversation, remembered how young and invincible they'd felt, making plans like the universe was obligated to cooperate with their dreams. I would have changed my plans, he said quietly. I know that now, Naomi replied. But at 19, all I could see was how much I was going to cost you. They read in careful chronological order. Letters from Lena's birth. She has your hands, long and elegant, and she grips my finger like she's never letting go. Her first Christmas. I bought her a tiny Santa outfit and cried in the store because you should have been there to laugh at how ridiculous she looked, Gurk. Her first day of school. She marched into that classroom like she owned it, and I thought about how proud you would have been. Some letters were practical updates, filled with developmental milestones and pediatrician visits. Others were raw, emotional processing, Naomi working through her fears and regrets on paper. A few were angry, furious letters about single parenthood and missed opportunities, and the unfairness of carrying the weight of their choice alone. Dear Jasper, Lena read from a letter dated on her 8th birthday. She asked about you today. Really asked, not just the casual questions she's asked before. She wanted to know if you were tall, if you liked music, if you would have taught her to ride a bike. I told her you were kind and smart, and that you would have loved her completely. But I didn't tell her that I still dream about you sometimes, or that I see your face in hers every single day." "You dreamed about me?" Jasper asked. "Sometimes." Naomi's voice was barely above a whisper. "Usually when I was trying to make big decisions about Lena, I'd imagine what you would say, how you'd approach whatever problem we were facing. What kinds of decisions? Whether to let her quit piano lessons when she was 8, whether to move to the better school district when she was 10, whether to let her go to space camp last summer, when all I could think about was how you would have been the one to help her build rockets in the garage." They found the letter Naomi had written the day she'd gotten the job at Cromwell, full of excitement about the sustainable housing project and wondering if Jasper would have been proud of the work she was doing. There was the letter from Lena's first school play, where she'd played a tree and delivered her one line with such dramatic intensity that half the audience had laughed. "She gets her flair for the dramatic from somewhere," Jasper read, grinning, "though I'm pretty sure it's not from me." "Definitely from you," Naomi said. "Remember your presentation on Frank Lloyd Wright? You acted out the entire prairie school movement using coffee cups and napkins. That was educational theatre. That was showing off." As the afternoon wore on, they moved through years of carefully documented life, birthday parties and science fairs, broken bones and academic achievements, teenage drama and mother-daughter arguments. Through it all, Naomi's voice on the page grew stronger, more confident, but the underlying thread of missing Jasper never disappeared. The last letter they read was dated just 6 months ago. "Dear Jasper," Naomi's voice was thick with emotion as she read her own words. "Lena is 14 now, and she's starting to ask harder questions about you. Questions I don't know how to answer, because I don't know what kind of man you became. I know what kind of man you were, generous and thoughtful and ambitious in the best possible way. But 15 years is a long time, and people change. I hope you're happy. I hope you found someone who loves you the way you deserve to be loved. I hope you built beautiful buildings and traveled to see those European cathedrals you always talked about. And if you ever think about us, I hope you know that we turned out okay. Different than we might have been with you here, but okay." The silence that followed was complete, broken only by the distant sound of Atlanta traffic and Lena's occasional sniffles. "I never went to Europe," Jasper said finally. "I kept meaning to, but there was always something else, work or the marriage or life getting in the way. And I thought about you both constantly, not every day, but more than I probably should have." "What would you have written back?" Lena asked. "If you'd gotten the letters." Jasper considered the question, thinking about 15 years of missed conversations and parallel lives. "I would have written about how proud I was of your mom for building a career and raising an incredible daughter on her own. I would have asked for pictures and updates, and probably begged to be part of your lives in whatever way you'd let me." "And now?" Naomi asked. "Now I don't have to write letters," he said, closing the journal carefully. "Now I get to say it all in person." Outside, the sun was setting over Atlanta, painting Naomi's living room in shades of gold and possibility. They'd spent the day reading the history of a family that had been separated by time and circumstance and fear, but somehow, against all odds, had found their way back to each other. "So what happens now?" Lena asked, ever practical. Jasper looked at Naomi, who was carefully organizing the emotions that had been scattered across her coffee table, like photographs from a life he'd never lived but somehow shared. "Now," he said, "we figure out how to be a family. Not the family we might have been 15 years ago, but the family we can be now." "Is that what we are?" Naomi asked quietly. "A family?" "I'd like to be," Jasper said. "And if you'll have me." For the first time in 15 years, all their letters had been read, all their secrets had been shared, and all their questions had been answered. What remained was the simple, complicated work of building something new from the foundation they'd finally been brave enough to excavate. Some stories, Lena thought, were worth the wait. 6 months later, the Riverside Commons Community Center stood complete against the Atlanta skyline, its windows gleaming in the late afternoon sun like promises kept. The grand opening celebration sprawled across the courtyard, filled with families, city officials, and the kind of joyful chaos that marked every successful community gathering. Jasper stood at the edge of the crowd, watching Lena demonstrate the new playground equipment to a group of younger children with the authority of someone who'd been consulted on every design decision. She was wearing a t-shirt that read Minnie Hayes Team, a gift from Carmen that had become her unofficial uniform for anything involving the project. "She's in her element," Naomi said, appearing at his elbow with 2 cups of lemonade from the food truck parked near the main entrance. "She gets that from you, the teaching gene." He accepted the drink gratefully, noting how Naomi's hand lingered just a moment longer than necessary when their fingers brushed. 6 months of careful courtship, dinners and family movie nights, and slowly rebuilt trust had taught them both the value of patience. "Actually, I think she gets the teaching gene from her grandmother Rose. I just provide the organizational structure and the tendency to color-code everything." They watched as Mrs. Rodriguez emerged from the community center's main entrance, followed by a tour group of potential residents. She was in full ambassador mode, gesturing enthusiastically at the childcare facilities visible through the large windows. "The sightlines are perfect," she was explaining to a young mother pushing a stroller. "You can see the playground from every program room, and the after-school space connects directly to the outdoor areas." "She's been giving tours for 3 hours straight," Daniel observed, joining them with his characteristic boundless energy. "I offered to take over, but she said, and I quote, 'This is my home now, and I'm going to show it off properly.'" "Our home," Naomi corrected gently. That was always the point. The afternoon had been full of speeches from city officials and ribbon-cutting ceremonies, but the real magic was happening in the smaller moments. Families exploring their new spaces, children claiming corners of the playground, teenagers discovering the music practice rooms that Lena had specifically requested during the design phase. "Jasper Hayes." A familiar voice boomed across the courtyard. Richard Cromwell approached with the satisfied expression of a man whose vision had come to life exactly as planned. "Outstanding work. The city planning office is already asking if we can replicate this model in other neighborhoods." "It was a team effort," Jasper replied, automatically deflecting credit in the way that had become second nature over their months of collaboration. "Don't be modest. This design is going to win awards." Richard clapped him on the shoulder. Speaking of which, I have a proposition. There's a sustainable housing project in Denver that could use your expertise. 6-month contract, excellent pay, chance to build something groundbreaking." Jasper felt Naomi go still beside him. 6 months ago, the offer would have been irresistible. New challenges, career advancement, the kind of opportunity that architects spent years working toward. "That's generous," he said carefully. But I'm not looking to relocate right now. Denver's not that far. You could commute or—" "Richard," Naomi interrupted, her voice carrying the particular authority she used during difficult client meetings. "Jasper has family here now. Some opportunities aren't worth the distance they require." The comment hung in the air like a declaration, and Jasper felt something warm and certain settle in his chest. Family. Not just Lena, but all of them. The complicated, imperfect, absolutely right constellation they'd built from second chances and stubborn hope. "Well," Richard said, clearly reading the subtext, "Atlanta's lucky to keep you both." As he wandered off to terrorize other employees with unsolicited career advice, Lena appeared at their side with the flushed excitement of someone who'd been running around all afternoon. "Mom, Dad, you have to see the music room. Mrs. Patterson brought her entire jazz class, and they're doing an impromptu concert. Also, the little kids are obsessed with the reading nook you designed, and one of them asked if they could live in it permanently." "Dad." The word still sent a small shock of joy through Jasper's system every time she said it so casually, like it had always been true. "Should we go listen to the concert?" Naomi asked. Actually, Lena said, pulling a folded piece of paper from her pocket, with the ceremonial importance of someone about to make an announcement, I have something for you first. She handed the paper to Jasper, who unfolded it to reveal a school assignment, the family tree project that had started this entire journey 8 months ago. But this version was different from the original she'd struggled with. This tree was full, complete, with names and dates and connections stretching back generations on both sides. I turned in the finished version last week, Lena explained. Got an A+, by the way. Mrs. Patterson said it was the most thorough family history she'd ever seen. Jasper studied the carefully drawn branches, noting how she'd included not just biological connections, but chosen family. Rose in her position of honor as beloved grandmother, Carmen listed as honorary aunt, even Daniel marked as family friend who makes terrible jokes but excellent lasagna. This is beautiful, he said, his voice thick with emotion he didn't try to hide. The best part, Lena continued, is that it's not finished. Like, technically, it's complete for the assignment, but families keep growing, right? So there's room for more branches. More branches? Naomi asked. Well, you and Dad aren't getting any younger, Lena said with the brutal honesty that only teenagers could deliver with a straight face. And I've been thinking that maybe I'd like to be a big sister someday. You know, when you two figure out your whole romantic situation and stop pretending you're not still completely in love with each other. Lena! Naomi's cheeks flushed pink. What? It's obvious. You get all soft-voiced when you talk to him, and he stares at you when you're not looking, and yesterday I caught you both laughing at something that wasn't even funny. Plus, last week when he fixed the leaky faucet in the kitchen, you watched him like he was performing brain surgery instead of basic plumbing. Jasper looked at Naomi, who was studying her lemonade cup with the intensity of someone conducting a scientific experiment. For the record, he said quietly, your daughter is extremely observant. She gets that from her father, Naomi replied, finally meeting his eyes. So what do you think? Lena pressed, apparently immune to adult awkwardness, about the expanding family tree situation. Jasper reached out and took Naomi's hand, marveling at how perfectly it fit in his after all these years. I think, he said, that some trees are worth the time it takes to grow them properly, even if it takes 15 years to plant them in the right soil, Naomi asked. Especially then. Around them, the celebration continued. Families exploring their new home, children claiming their spaces, community taking root in the structure they'd built from blueprints and hope. The Riverside Commons Community Center stood as proof that some things were worth the wait, worth the careful planning, worth the courage it took to build something lasting. So, Lena said, folding her family tree carefully and tucking it back into her pocket. Does this mean I can start planning a wedding? Because I have some very specific ideas about color coordination and venue selection. Let's start with dinner, Naomi laughed. One family milestone at a time. But you're thinking about it, right? Lena persisted with the tenacity that had brought them all together in the first place. Jasper looked at this remarkable young woman who'd forced them all to be braver than they thought possible. Then at Naomi, whose smile held 15 years of love that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger. Yeah, he said, we're thinking about it. As the sun set over Atlanta, casting long shadows across their completed project, 3 people who'd found their way back to each other walked toward the community center they'd built together. Behind them, families were settling into spaces designed with love and attention to human need. Ahead of them stretched the complicated, beautiful work of building a life together. One conversation, one choice, one day at a time. Some foundations, Jasper thought as Lena linked her arms through both of theirs, were worth waiting 15 years to build properly. And some families were worth fighting for, no matter how long the blueprint took to complete. In the end, the best architecture wasn't about the buildings you designed, but the homes you created within them. The end. Thanks for watching to the end. Did you like the story? Tell us what you thought in the comments below. We want to know what you think. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe now for more exciting stories you won't want to miss. Activate the bell to be notified whenever a new video comes out. See you in the next story. See you there.